All right, good afternoon. Wow, you cannot imagine how absolutely incredible it is to be out here in the woods. Now, I'm going to try to pick my computer up, and just give you a little taste of what this background is like. Um, my hopes to honor my dad was to just have the best country background that I could while me and my wife is on vacation. Um, Today is August the 23rd, 2021. My name is Willis. I'm the pastor of Grace Bridge Ministries. I try to get my lovely wife to come over. Maybe I'll get her to come over and peek in, as our story is similar. Both of us kind of had to go through, through life at some point without our dads, and um, actually think that my wife's dad lived a bit longer than my dad did. My dad passed in December of 1999, and I think my wife's father kind of went on 2003. But that's neither here nor there. Today's the 23rd of August, and my dad would have been 79 years old or young um, today if God would have allowed him to stay on this side. Before I go any further, before I kind of move into anything else with this, my wife, hey, Mrs. Robinson, she won't come over. I'm trying to get her to come over just to peek in for a little bit. She's sauntering this way. Let me pick this up, and I'm going to turn it this way for her so that she can kind of come in a little bit. There she is. And look at the background. You just can't miss the background here. Now she's leaving, and I'm gonna be all by myself on this one. Anyway, so the background, like I said, I just wanted to try to get the best. All right, let me get out of this here. Look at those rocks. Like, gee whiz, are you kidding me? Like, to anyone who doesn't understand the beauty of God's creation, you look at that and say, like, it's just a rock. No, not so. Um, what could I possibly say today in honor of my dad, Mr. Willis J. Robinson Sr.? Well, it's beautiful out. What I would do to have a 35-year-old Mr. Willis J. Robinson Sr. stroll up, um, with me being at 56, soon to be 57, the 29th of this month. Yes, my birthday is 6 days after my dad's birthday. My dad was born 22 years and 6 days before me, 1942, August the 23rd. And he brought me into this world by God's grace August the 29th of 1964. 22 years and about 6 months apart, 6 months and 6 days. Um, but, I honor my dad. Um, and just so grateful to have the resources that we have in today's society of 2021 to be able to, take a computer out, um, connect to a Wi-Fi device, and be out in the woods, connected to a satellite high above to communicate my just total, um, just gratitude, gratefulness that God has allowed me to still be on this side of heaven. I do have a couple of, verses that I want to encourage your hearts with. And I want to just use me and my dad as the example as I lift some things from these verses. Now, the goal that I have in mind is to just say, what the Lord may lead to say, in hopes of any son, any father that may be apart, um, both still alive. Unlike my situation, unlike my wife's situation, my dad's already passed. I'd like to maybe make some comments in hopes to bring a father and a son closer. If you're not hanging out with your dad much anymore, if some things have happened over the years that have separated or divided you from your dad, my friend, I'm hoping that something can be said during this particular time to bring that wall down. All right, so on my side of the screen, you won't be able to see it, but I can see a passage of scriptures in the book of Proverbs. Now, in the Bible itself, the word father, singular, is found over 750 times. Can you imagine that? 750 times you find the word father, singular, many, many more times, plural, fathers. But I thought to just look at what the Bible might say about the word father. And it was so cool what was found. Now, I'm going to just read these verses by Solomon, who was a son, no question, dad being David. Um, we believe the book of Proverbs is written by Solomon, and he being the son of David, um, he went through a number of experiences. We know that before his father passed, that David told Solomon that he was to prove himself to be a man. If you look towards the end of David's life, you see that. Um, Interesting that God would remind me of that section of scripture towards the end of David's life, encouraging Solomon to prove himself to be a man. I did not. As many times and as often as my dad sought to teach me how to be a man, I did not listen. And it cost me a number of years of my life. Um, my dad, of course, had his own stuff that he had to deal with in his own heart. But that being my dad, that had nothing to do with my disobedience to him. And if I'm speaking to a young man right now, when I mentioned being disobedient to your father, then my encouragement to you is to stop. I mean, your dad has in mind to raise you to be a better man than he himself he knows have been when he looks at his mistakes. But my dad sought to instruct me as a father. Um, and I tell you, I would listen until I probably got up to my 14th or 15th birthday, and then just absolutely began to start being rebellious, just doing my own thing and not wanting to listen to my dad. Didn't want his hand holding me from doing what I thought to be right, and just so many poor decisions that I made down throughout the years that led my life in and out of prison. But one of the things, out of the number of things that I found, was that, and I want you to hear this, my brother, young man, even you who may be in your 40s and your dad is still around, your dad can still give you some instruction as a father because he has seen some things in his experience that you may have not seen yet. And so, one of the first things I want to say to you is that a son should obey, listen closely, hear, listen to the instruction of your dad. My dad is not around anymore, passed again in 1999, and I'd love, I'd yearn, I just would be so cool to have my dad still around to be able to listen to him and hear his instruction. One of the other things that I saw here is that um, a father who has sought to teach his son, has sought to give him instructions so that he might be a productive citizen. One of the things that will develop if that son does not listen is that foolishness was surfaced from that son's life. And a father has no joy in the foolishness that he sees in his son. And I tell you, I look back, namely to one particular time when my dad was probably in his early 50s, probably 48, 49 years old. I think the year was probably 1985. And I think that I was probably 21 or so. And, we went out to shoot a game of pool, and he was still trying to tell me what I needed to do to become the man that he desired for me to be. And I was doing a lot of foolish things, and I could tell that he had no joy. He had no joy in me, no um, emotion that he could enjoy. Where he said, "Well, that's my son right there, and I see some things in him that I've taught him," and that wasn't the case. Um, Even at 21 years old, and all the years that my dad had tried to teach me the right things, I just didn't listen, and he had no joy when he looked at me at 21 years old. And I pray that that's not the case for you, my friend. I pray that that's not the case. That when your dad looks at you, he sees that you're doing the right thing. If you got kids, you're trying to take care of them, and he has joy when he looks at you. He just a certain level of like that's my boy rises in him when he looks at you. The other thing here that I saw is the statement made: "A foolish son is a grief to his father." Definitely, my dad had no joy in me, but I tell you, he had a lot of grief, a lot of pain when he would hear of all the times that I was arrested. Just the grief that surfaced in his heart. I remember on one particular occasion, he came to visit me when I was in prison in North Carolina. And I looked across the table at him and I saw how he would look at me. It just was no joy, as I aforementioned. And the reason why was because of the grief that I brought him from my foolishness. And I'm saying to you, young man, I'm saying to you, um, my brother, um, don't do that to your dad. Don't bring grief into his life because of the foolishness and the things that you may be involved with that can cause him grief. The next thing that I saw here is what Solomon says in regards to listening to a father who has begotten you. The word begotten there indicating that, a man and a woman comes together, and out of the marriage institution there is the fruit, and that is a son or a daughter. And the verse says, "Listen to your father who begot you." Like, why wouldn't one listen to a man who was used by God through the marriage institution to bring you into this world? Like, the reason why I'm in this earth is because my father's seed. And why wouldn't I listen to him? He has a right to speak into my life. And the many times, and I know I'm saying this over and over again, but the many times that my dad would try to sit me down and talk to me, even my uncle Rob, he would seek to try to speak to me, who was also gone home from this earth. Um, I just didn't have no desire to listen, and it caused me so much pain. Gratefully now, that's not the case. The next thing you see here is it says, "A wise son makes a father glad." And we've seen the things, the foolishness, the grief, um, not listening, not bringing joy to my dad. Here we see that if a son listens, there can be wisdom, there can be wise decision making. And we see it says, "A wise son makes a father glad." I tell you, I wish that I could have done that in the short time that I had my dad. Um, he, I remember when I was on my last sentence at Trenton State Prison, I remember I had the privilege of calling him I think he was on his deathbed, if you would say that. And it was like October of I think 1999. It was without me knowing, a couple of months before he actually passed. And I remember I was able to talk with him. I remember that the conversation we had was just a bit of relief that, even though I was locked up and even though I had not brought any joy into his life up to that point, um, I think that our conversation was a good conversation. And again, I never really even knew my dad. But here, what we find is that it states a wise son makes a father glad. I hope that all those years ago, a couple of months before he passed, that he could actually say that that's my boy right there. That's my eldest son. And I hope that your dad, as he sees you, my friend, he sees that you're seeking to do the right thing. I hope that this verse, where it says a wise son makes a father glad, can be true of you. And the very last one that I want to consider here is it's really an interesting statement made by Solomon all those years ago when he penned these words. And it simply says that children, children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. Children's children. We're talking about a son who has brought children into the world. And notice what it says: children's children are the crown of old men. The crown of old men. Children's children. So, grandchildren, sons or daughters who are the second generation from a dad who would be their granddad. Notice it says that those grandchildren are the crown of old men. You know what a crown does? A crown actually stands out on the head of any human being, and it's to say that that person has gotten to a point to where they're recognized in society as having accomplished this, that, or the other. And here it says, children's children are the crown of old men. So there are elder men who has brought children into the world. They've watched their children bring children in the world. These elder men, these grandfathers, they have worked with the grandchildren, and based upon that work, based upon the efforts that have been made over time, those children reflect that old man. And my dad, I as far as much as I can remember, I am not certain as to how much time my dad at 57 years old had to spend with his grandchildren. I know that my brother Mike would have had kids. I believe my sister Sharon would have had kids. I know my sister Donna would have had kids. April, I'm sure. Um, I don't know how much time my dad had to spend with his grandchildren. But whatever time he had, I am quite certain, I am just absolutely certain that if he was able to say anything now, looking at his grandkids, I'm sure he would say that they're the crown. They represent me through my sons, my daughters. Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? So wish my dad was still around. Of course, he's not, and that's okay. I'm hoping that his grandkids, from his kids, are shining. I hope that at some point, if they're not a part of God's kingdom, that they will be. And praise God for that. Notice that the last part of this says, and the glory of children is their father. The glory of children is their father. Looking at a son, looking at a daughter, definitely not looking at me when I was in my mess all those years ago. Um, Definitely did not look good. And shame was the word that was probably in my dad's heart when he looked or even thought of me in prison all those years ago, knowing that he did not raise me that way. But I think now, if he went to glory and he's able to see me now, I'm hoping that where this phrase says, and the glory of children is their father, I'm hoping that he's able to say, that's the son that I wanted. That's the son that I tried to build, tried to raise all those years ago when I was teaching them right from wrong. Well, no worries. Um, I'm hoping that anything that was said here, anything that may have encouraged you, I'm hoping, I'm really hoping that something was said here that encouraged you. I'm hoping that if you and your dad, and whatever your situation is, um, your grandkids, I'm hoping, I'm really hoping that you don't set the same example that I did all those years ago. And you don't have your dad around, you don't have your grandpop around to say to him or her, I really appreciate what you did all those years ago. Thank God for you. We pray that all things are well with you here from Grace Bridge Ministries. God bless you.